Welcome back to the deep dive. For something like 2 generations, the number of Japanese professionals living and working overseas just kept going up, always up.
Right. It felt like a constant, a reflection of Japan's global reach, really.
Exactly. Corporate ambition, expanding opportunities. It was the story for decades. But today, we're diving into something pretty different, a major shift. Our sources are showing that after all that growth, the Japanese expat population is actually shrinking.
Yeah, that upward line you mentioned, it was incredibly consistent from what, 1989 right through to 2019. If you were looking at global trends, that was one you could almost bank on.
But then 2020 hit.
And everything changed.
Mhm.
It wasn't just a pause. The growth stopped dead and the trend actually reversed. And it's been dropping, measurably every year since then.
Wow.
Now, this isn't just a blip or some cyclical thing. It feels much more like a fundamental rethink of, well, global careers and assignments for Japanese companies.
Okay, so if the whole trend has flipped, our mission today has got to be understanding why. What's driving this? Is it like new corporate thinking, financial pressures, or maybe the aftershocks from, recent global events?
It's likely a mix of all those.
So, for you listening, the goal here is to walk away understanding why that old Japanese expat playbook is basically being rewritten right now. Okay, let's unpack this. Where should we start? Where's the drop most obvious?
Well, traditionally, when big companies expanded, they set up major hubs,
Right.
in the most dynamic markets.
Sure.
And for Japanese firms, Southeast Asia was absolutely key to that, central. But our sources are saying that's precisely where the exodus, if you want to call it that, is really concentrated right now. The decline there is pretty significant.
Huh. Is that mostly about costs? Like, is it just too expensive now to send people over? Or is there something more strategic going on, how they manage things regionally?
It's a fascinating mix, actually. But the strategic part, that seems really defining here. Companies seem to be shifting away from that old model, sending managers from Tokyo to run the show overseas.
Okay.
Instead, they're leaning much more towards localization, hiring local talent.
Ah, right.
They're realizing that to really understand the market, the local culture, the consumers, well, local hires are often just more effective and maybe more efficient, too.
That makes sense. And that directly hits the need for expats rotating in and out. But you mentioned something else, too, a personal angle, shifting it from just the company decision to the family or household decision?
Absolutely. That's a huge piece of this. Think about the workforce back in Japan. You've got
Okay.
way more dual-income households now than, say, 20 years ago.
Right.
So accepting that overseas post, it isn't automatically the big financial win it maybe once was, especially considering the disruption to the family.
Yeah, if your spouse has a good career in Tokyo. Yeah.
Exactly. Pulling up stakes for 3 years, disrupting their career. It needs a really significant financial incentive to make sense. And if companies are also maybe tightening the belts on those generous expat packages, well, the whole calculation just changes for the family.
And we're seeing that in the data, particularly in those key regional places. Can you give us an example?
Yeah, Thailand is a perfect case study.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, it's been a massive manufacturing and business hub for Japan Inc.,
Mm-hmm.
hugely important.
Mm-hmm.
But despite that, Thailand has actually seen its Japanese expat population decrease for 3 years running now.
3 years straight. Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty concrete evidence that this localization strategy is really changing who's actually on the ground there.
Okay, so Southeast Asia is seeing this strategic shift. But this isn't just an Asian story, is it? I mean, when you think Japanese professions abroad, you think USA, you think China, major hubs. Are they feeling similar pressures?
They are, definitely. But maybe for slightly different sets of reasons, or at least with different emphasis. The overall global decline we're seeing, it's definitely amplified by drops in places like New York and Shanghai. Big drops.
Okay.
So while localization might be the big story in Asia, the continued decline in, say, the US or China seems more tied to, well, personal factors and financial sustainability for the expats themselves.
What kind of factors, especially for people who've maybe been there a long time, like long-term residents, why are they deciding now's the time to head back to Japan?
Our sources point to two main things. First, and it's undeniable, is just the financial squeeze. The cost of living in major global cities keeps going up and up.
Tell me about it. Rent, healthcare.
And critically, international school tuition. That's a huge one for families. It's making it incredibly tough for even mid to senior level managers to maintain that comfortable expat lifestyle without massive company support. And that support, it seems to be getting scaled back.
You hear those stories constantly, families doing complex math just to afford housing and schooling in Manhattan or Shanghai.
Precisely. And the second factor, it seems to be a lingering effect of the pandemic, that period of, intense uncertainty and disruption.
Mm.
It seemed to have prompted a deeper rethink for many people who'd maybe spent a decade or more living abroad.
A sort of what's really important moment.
Kind of, yeah.
Mm.
Maybe realizing that being closer family, the stability of Japan's social systems, maybe that started to outweigh the benefits of staying in these very expensive, sometimes stressful foreign cities.
Mm.
So yeah, the U.S. and China, still vital hubs, no doubt, but they are seeing a clear reduction in their Japanese populations.
Okay, so we've got this clear picture, an exodus, or at least a shrinking from those traditional big expat centers.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting because this is the deep dive. The numbers aren't falling everywhere, are they?
Exactly. That's the twist.
So if Japanese professionals are leaving New York, leaving Shanghai, where are they potentially going instead? Are there new hotspots emerging?
Well, what's fascinating is that the story isn't just retreat. It's more like a major geographical pivot, a diversification. While those big centers shrink, we're actually seeing growth, real growth in some quite unexpected regions.
Like where?
Our sources are highlighting places across Africa, the Middle East, Central America,
Yeah.
and Oceania.
Wow, okay. That's incredibly diverse. Africa, the Middle East, Central America, Oceania, that spans the globe.
Yeah.
If the old hubs were, manufacturing and finance centers mostly, what does this new pattern tell us? What kind of interests are driving this move?
It suggests a couple of big things, I think.
Huh.
First, Japanese corporate and maybe even government interests are clearly broadening out. Significance.
Expanding their horizons.
Yeah, maybe exploring totally new frontiers. You could imagine infrastructure projects in parts of Africa, maybe energy security initiatives driving moves to the Middle East, or resource development in Oceania. The type of assignment seems to be changing too.
How so?
Less about managing huge, established factories or financial offices, and maybe more about pioneering new markets or specialized high-level project management, niche roles.
So the Japanese professional isn't necessarily packing up and going home from the world stage entirely. They're just spreading out more
Well,
into potentially smaller, more specialized clusters around the globe.
that seems to be the pattern emerging, yes.
And that kind of strategic shift, it must change what kind of support these professionals need, right? Especially if they're setting up in cities that maybe don't have a huge established Japanese community or infrastructure, housing, for instance.
Oh, absolutely. The needs change dramatically. If you go from, say, Bangkok with its established Japanese community, schools, shops, to a developing city somewhere in Africa, it's a completely different ballgame.
Right.
You probably shift from needing that broad community infrastructure to needing more agile, maybe secure, and potentially shorter-term flexible living solutions, like extended stay apartments or serviced offices, especially if the work is more project-based, more pioneering. This diversification is definitely forcing that whole support ecosystem, housing, finance, logistics, to adapt to become more flexible itself.
That leads us nicely into the financial sector. All this turbulence, shrinking numbers in old markets, this wide new geographic spread that has to be a challenge for the banks and financial institutions that traditionally served those large expat populations, right? How are they coping?
It creates huge pressure, no doubt. I mean, if your whole business model is built around serving thousands of mid-level Japanese managers on 3-year rotations in specific Asian capitals, well, this localization trend kind of pulls the rug out from under you.
So what do?
We're seeing major players basically recalibrate their entire approach, shifting focus from just sheer volume to maybe the quality or profile of the expats who remain or are moving to these new areas.
Can you give us an example of that? How does a big financial firm adapt if their traditional expat customer base in, say, Southeast Asia is shrinking?
Well, look at Daiwa Securities Group. It's quite interesting. They're actually expanding their presence in Southeast Asia right now.
Expanding. That sounds counterintuitive given what we just discussed about shrinking numbers there.
It does sound odd at first, right?
Yeah.
But the key is who they're targeting. There's a strategic nuance here. They aren't going after that shrinking pool of standard rotational staff anymore.
Okay. So who are they focusing on then?
They're specifically targeting the affluent segment, the wealthier Japanese expatriates who are still there or perhaps moving within the region.
Ah, okay. So not the average assignee, but the higher level executives, the business owners maybe.
Exactly. It's a crucial distinction. It shows they recognize how the demographic profile is changing. Even if the total number of expats goes down because companies are hiring locally, the people who do remain overseas,
Yeah.
or the ones being sent to these new, more diverse locations. They're often the senior executives, the specialized project leaders, the entrepreneurs, people with significant wealth and more complex financial needs.
That's a classic business lesson, isn't it? A decline in overall volume doesn't always mean a decline in the value of the market you're serving.
Precisely. And it raises this important point. Companies, especially in finance, are realizing that while the sheer number of expats might be shifting downwards dramatically, the financial clout and strategic importance of those who remain, or those going to new frontiers, is actually critical. They need to adapt their services.
So, catering to a more specialized, maybe higher net worth group needing sophisticated wealth management, not just everyday banking.
That seems to be the play. The new Japanese expat abroad, whether they're in the Middle East or Oceania or still in a traditional hub but in a senior role, is often a key decision maker or someone with substantial assets.
Okay, that brings us towards wrapping this up. So, for you listening, the key takeaway distilled here seems clear. This drop in Japanese expats isn't just some simple economic retreat, it's much more nuanced.
Right. It's driven by a deep strategic shift in how Japanese companies operate globally, favoring local talent now for market know-how.
And that's combined with personal financial realities, like the rising cost of living globally making long-term overseas stays harder for many, prompting returns to Japan.
And yet, that whole dynamic has fueled this really fascinating, maybe unexpected geographical diversification. We're seeing professionals spreading out, exploring new territories, Africa, the Middle East, Oceania.
It's a complete redrawing of the map, in a way.
Yep.
Now, as we finish, here's a final thought, something for you to maybe mull over. If Japanese companies are making such a strong strategic shift towards localization, especially in high-growth places like Southeast Asia, choosing local hires over costly expats to get that market agility, what might that signal for the future?
Good question.
I mean, what could this Japanese trend suggest about how companies from other major economies, think the US, think Europe, might operate in their same regions down the line? Are we maybe seeing the very beginning of a much larger global shift away from that traditional, decades-old concept of the expat assignment as the default way to manage overseas operations?
That is definitely something to think about. Is this a leading indicator for a broader global trend?
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?